Now, the devastating floods in Kwazulu-Natal illustrated the importance of proper town planning and building in areas that are climate-proof. The African Climate Reality Project is calling for exactly that. In a recent webinar hosted by the South African Weather Service as well as Salga, experts highlighted and unpacked measures which are necessary to protect communities against damaging weather events. To speak to us more on this, I'm joined by Dean Bhebhe from the African Climate Reality Project. Dean, thank you very much for your time this morning. Now, you're calling for somewhat of an urgent improvement in town planning so it's more climate resilient. Now, one would assume that that call has become even more urgent or legitimate following the KZN floods. Talk to me about this.
Thank you very much for having me. So, as you mentioned, the Forestry, Fisheries and Environment Department hosted a webinar really regarding on how climate change impacts society. And given the climate emergency, the webinar reinforced, as you mentioned, the urgent need to improve how we protect our cities from the impacts of the ongoing climate crisis. South Africa needs to stand and be at a point where they need to start beginning to implement policies and frameworks that are aligned to climate adaptation. This fundamentally would mean moving beyond, reactive approaches and embracing action-oriented measures that are fundamentally grounded on understanding and addressing the question, is the way we currently plan for the future and react to an unexpected change to sufficient uncertainties, scale and long-term lead time to the complexities of the climate, is that really aligned to protecting the future and the lives of young people?
Now, if they had to move away from being reactive, as you said, more proactive, let's give practical meaning to this. During heavy rain, we expect a certain extent of drainage capacity to be overwhelmed somehow. Would perhaps a situation where we have the plantation of more greenery assist in this case? Because we've heard experts say somehow when you're planting some of these trees, it redirects or shifts the flow of water or even allows for absorption. Are those viable options perhaps?
I think the issue that we're currently battling is the government continues to rely on city infrastructure or water infrastructure that was not built for a climate emergency. So if you look at other examples like countries in China, they've already started adopting what is commonly referred to as sponge cities. So instead of relying really on that grey aging infrastructure of pipes, dams and channels, they develop these sponge cities that allow urban areas to absorb water in times of rainfall and release in times of drought. So this provides us with cross-cutting benefits that allow cities to not only mitigate extreme weather events such as flooding, but also to absorb carbon dioxide. So to a larger extent, the idea of even planting more trees and being green as a city does allow us a pathway to achieve climate resilience and climate protection, something that can be fundamentally also be driven through nature-based solutions.
Why do you think it's taken so long for government to actually look at such options? Because the minute I heard it from experts, I fully understood what needs to happen, that we need to start planting and become the sponge cities, as you say. So why are we seeing a snail pace?
So I think the best way to answer that question is to imagine right now South Africa is in a drought. And there are three different types of drought. There's the hydrological drought, there's the meteorological drought, all are grounded on there is no water. But there's a special drought that's arising, which is a drought within the state itself, a drought where there is a lack of individuals who are able to make decisions that are actually grounded on actually protecting people in a space of a climate emergency, which is why even at the current state, the water infrastructure of South Africa needs urgent attention and is currently lacking, because even that structure alone is really grounded on subsurface pipes. So I think the reason as to why we have that, there's also a common less awareness regarding how we understand the climate emergency, and at the same time that lack of leadership and the will to want to invest into climate solutions that are meaningful and impactful for people in the long run. So as a result, because of these issues around subsurface pipes and misdistribution of resources at a government level, local municipalities tend to now suffer losses, due to pipe bursts and sporadic problems in the areas that grounded on water water quality and availability. That also exacerbates the climate crisis, because in a time of a flood, as we experienced in KZN, they do not have the capabilities as well because of those subsurface pipes. So already there's a flood in an area, but the pipes that are existing cannot control the water. So instead they're bursting, and those sporadic problems just exacerbates and continues to make the problem quite precarious. And the government just simply has a drought on its own. There's a lack of pure, clear mind.
I seem to have lost you there. We seem to be struggling with that connection, but perhaps you can hear me now. You also called for a more gender-responsive climate, or more gender-responsive climate laws in its entirety. Can you just expand on this? It's Dean. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, it seems we've lost Dean there. Very important conversation around the sponge cities that he speaks of, that perhaps we need to plant more greenery to redirect the water flow and have it mostly absorbed into the atmosphere. Now, that was campaigner Dean Bhebhe from the African Climate Reality